everyone. Thank you for taking the time to show up to this showcase for mine and Afiq's EPQs. Today, I will be talking about whether perception of beauty affect women's careers. So there are multiple reasons that led me to wanting to do this project. So the first one is the personal experience with how perception of beauty has shaped my life, social misconceptions of beautiful women and their not so beautiful peers, using that term very loosely, and interest in how beauty has evolved with changing times and social climates. So the main one for me to do this project was the first one. Growing up, I have an elder sister, and she's always regarded as the prettier one. So as a result, people tended to center the focus of her beauty and how I looked in comparison, and of course our personality traits in comparison as well. So I based my self-worth off of the fact that she was more beautiful than me and consequently better in every aspect of life. And also for the last one, I've always had an interest in how beauty evolves and adapts with culture and changing times. Which is why I wanted to talk about beauty and women specifically, because beauty impacts women more than I think it does men. So just in case you're curious, this is a pictures of my sister and I. In addition to being very beautiful, if I should say so myself, she was also a straight A student in high school, a star athlete and a star performer. Recently she graduated from Sunway University and Lancaster University, top of her class, first class honors with a marketing degree. In addition to that, she also received a job opportunity to work for a huge TNC called Reckitt Beckensur as a management trainee. And in addition to that, she is an advertisement talent, and she's been in a lot of local telemovies and TV shows as well. So what was this project about? Well, essentially it was to discover and express how beauty affects people more than they may realize, and how our perception of people can lead us to inadvertently discriminate when considering their academic or career prospects. Beauty as a whole is relevant to everyone, regardless of their culture, their background, their class, and their social upbringing. So everyone generally tends to, be it unconsciously or consciously, fixate on their appearance in some shape or form. This is an attempt to appear more presentable, more likable, and of course, more beautiful to other people. We do this because we want to manipulate how people perceive us, because we want them to perceive us more positively. And as a result, we are also hoping to manipulate our personal perception of ourselves, which leads to judgment, which is inevitably and undoubtedly innate. As much as we try to deny it, we've all judged people at some point based on their appearance. And as such, the concept of beauty is a result of that. So what were the aims and objectives I chose to discuss in my EPQ? Can anyone tell me what this movie is?
Mean Girls.
Why do you think I decided to include Mean Girls in the slide?
Because they're pretty.
Because they're pretty, what else?
Because they're mean.
No, because one of the main themes of the movie is beauty. Like, if you've seen the movie, I forgot her name. Katie, she undergoes a transformation from being average to being beautiful, and as a result, people perceived her more positively, but her personality also changed because of that physical transformation. So the first objective I chose to discuss was the conventional definition of beauty, or what defines someone as beautiful. The second one was how beauty affects perception and the halo effect. The last one is the beauty premium and the ugliness penalty. Is it a myth or reality? So the first one I found out about, there are three main traits in what defines someone as conventionally beautiful. Again, when I use these terms, I use it very loosely because I understand that people's standards of beauty is subjective and relative, but this is just the generalized meaning of it. So the generalized traits are averaging, hormones, and symmetry. Averaging is when multiple faces are averaged into one, kind of like math, to get one holistic looking face. And this experiment was done by Langlois and her colleagues in 1994, where they digitized and generated images of 32 faces altogether, and the result of that was that this face was perceived as more beautiful. Hormones, in women, higher hormonal levels of progesterone suggest fertility in a woman, which suggests both youth and sexual maturity, which goes hand in hand with how she's perceived as more beautiful. And the last one is symmetry. If you guys remember Mr. Hopkins' rubber hit last year, where he talks about the golden ratio, or phi, which is 1 to 1.618. It's a naturally recurring pattern in nature, and facial symmetry indicates both health and genetic quality, because if you can maintain symmetrical faces despite environmental and genetic stresses, you're immediately seen as more high quality. So progress. I'm gonna talk a little bit about how my EPQ journey went. So how my ideas changed, the creation of my EPQ, what I found out, and the research I underwent, the guidance I received from teachers, the successes I faced and what I gained from the project, and also the struggles I had to overcome and the failures I experienced throughout the process. So, how has my project changed from my initial ideas? Initially, I wanted to talk about beauty standards in a more general sense because of how different it is according to time and according to place, but this was a bit broad, and I also wanted to talk about the progression of the use of cosmetics and how it has evolved over time to adapt to these changes. But I didn't feel like there was enough for me to just write a whole 5,000 word essay on just beauty standards in general, even though I were to go by every single country and what their standards were. I feel like it would probably be a bit too dull and boring. So I tried to shift its focus to if perception of beauty affect women and their social opportunities, but then again that was a bit too broad because I could go into how it affects their relationships with families, friends, and romantic relationships, and also how they're perceived in academia and in their workplace. Initially, I wanted to produce a documentary as well, but I thought this was logistically unrealistic and unreasonable because I didn't have access to video cameras or good video editing softwares, so I didn't want to produce a haphazard or a half-hearted project because I wanted my project to be the best it could be. So on this slide is two of the sources I used the most in my EPQ. The first one is a book by Naomi Wolf called The Beauty Myth, and this one is a TED Talk by Anjan Chatterjee called How Your Brain Decides What's Beautiful. So what I've gathered from these sources, and obviously the other sources that I used in my EPQ, is that beauty is a social construct. It doesn't really exist, and it wasn't really a thing until society and the patriarchy kind of instilled these kind of views upon us. And also what defines a person as beautiful, as I mentioned before, is all quite scientific. So there's things to do with neuroscience, biology, and psychology, as I mentioned before, with averaging, hormones, and symmetry. And beauty inadvertently affects perception and consequently perceived performance in both academia and in the workplace. As I mentioned before, one of the objectives I had was to find out how beauty affects perception, and as a result, that is the halo effect. So basically, the halo effect is a result of the concept of beauty. It's a cognitive bias that associates beautiful people with more positive traits simply on the base of their appearance, which in hand would affect labor market outcomes because beautiful people earn 3 to 4% more than those who aren't beautiful. And although this amount seems marginal, it will obviously accumulate over time. In 2012, I found a joint university study which was done in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where equally qualified resumes were orchestrated and sent out to real job opening interviews. And those with more beautiful pictures actually received 36% higher callback rates than those who didn't have beautiful pictures attached. However, in spite of this, beauty still remains an inaccurate indicator in determining a woman's intelligence, her performance in the workplace, and her competence. It doesn't really affect electoral and potentially political careers as well, as there is a heavier emphasis on intelligence and trustworthiness. But sometimes, another interesting thing I found out was that those who are perceived as less beautiful actually earn significantly higher. This is because they're assumed to have a better education and they're assumed to not focus on their appearance as much just because they're not better looking. So individual differences in health, intelligence, and personality were bigger factors in deciding income. And a study that was similar to the one I mentioned before, done in 2011, actually went against the notion that those who are beautiful benefited more. The results of this study actually showed that women with no pictures attached to their CVs received a higher rate of callbacks than those who did. So guidance I received last year I received guidance from Ms. Twig and Mr. Fletcher, and this year I received guidance from Mr. Hare and Mr. Pedro. So to summarize all the guidance that they've given me, it's basically to narrow down my topic, because I had a really broad topic which had the potential to sound complicated, incoherent, and just overall not very good. So I always acted on their feedback. I restructured my essay multiple times to make sure it was the best it could be, and I also made sure to adhere to my deadlines that I set myself to really be disciplined with my progress. So, successes and gains. Generally, I received good feedback on my essay, which I obviously see as a success. I also genuinely enjoyed the writing of my EPQ because it was a topic that hit home to me. It was also something that I was really passionate and interested in, and it also played on my strengths as a arts and humanities student who writes essays like twice a week, 3 times a week. So it also developed my essay writing skills along that. And I also managed to finish within the timeline that I set myself, which I obviously see as a success as well. And there was also a lot of resources available on the topic I chose. But with successes and gains comes failures and struggles. I will be honest, I did face more failures and struggles than I did successes and gains, but that's all part of the journey. So I struggled a lot with finding motivation to finish this project, especially around the end, because you just feel like you need to focus on other things instead of the EPQ, but I managed to sought external support from my friends and family, and I also told myself that I'd feel really accomplished if I finished this, and I did. My second one was that I often felt overwhelmed by the amount of work I had to juggle between my A-levels and the EPQ, so I overcame this by utilizing my study periods, my EPQ periods, and my prep time to its fullest, so I don't have to work beyond that because I still need to rest and I still have a life outside of college. So it's just something that you could probably keep in mind. As I mentioned before, there was a lot of resources available, so I also had to devote a lot of time to make sure that each source I found was relevant to my EPQ. So to overcome this, you can read abstracts and prefaces of the sources that you found, and because they kind of set out what the source is about, and it stops you from devoting too much time on just evaluating each source. And lastly, this might be really petty, but Harvard citation format was just really difficult for me. It was really confusing. It almost made me cry. But there was a lot of sites and a lot of apps and a lot of videos online that could make it easier for you. So how would this project go on to affect me in the future? I intend to pursue a field of study and a career in law. So I feel like this would help with the project helped with having to do constant research and reading that I would have to do in university and in my career. And it also helps me develop my critical thinking skills, because I had to be really discriminate and evaluative in all the sources that I found to ensure that I look beyond, I look at the bigger picture, and also to ensure that I was as objective as possible with my EPQ. So this is just general advice I would give to someone who plans to undergo the EPQ. Number one, always ask for help and guidance if you need it. They're not there to catch you out, they're there to guide you. And there's a lot of teachers available, and we have the benefit of being on campus all the time, so help is always there. Number two, manage your time as best as you can. Again, utilize all the study periods, the study periods, the prep time, and the EPQ periods that you have, so you don't work beyond that, you don't burn the midnight oil. Number three, don't procrastinate, especially at the last minute. I personally didn't really struggle with procrastination because I'm really strict with myself when it comes to that. But I get that it gets really stressful when you do procrastinate, so just try your best to avoid it. The fourth one, learn to accept any feedback and critique that comes your way. It might seem a bit harsh and personal at times, but they're there to just make you, help you get the best grade that you can. Number five, I think most of year 13 struggled with this. Keep a log of all your resources and any changes to your EPQ, because if you don't do it in the beginning, it's just going to accumulate in the end, and it's just going to be a mess. So how do I feel with how everything turned out? Would I do it again? Generally, I'm really satisfied with the finished project, and I would definitely do it again if I had the opportunity to discuss a free topic like I did with this part. Thank you for listening.